Snow pressed against the windows as Elena stepped onto the porch, her breath sharp in the cold night. She held the doorknob lightly, listening for any sign of Ralph's temper waiting on the other side. The hallway lights were off again, the house dim and watching, as if it shared the tension in her chest. A beer can rolled somewhere inside, scraping softly like a warning she already understood too well. Her hands trembled, but her steps stayed quiet, trained by years of surviving his shifting moods. The air smelled of smoke and metal, the familiar scent of nights when danger lurked without shouting. Every sound mattered, every silence mattered more, and Elena counted both to measure her next move. She wished she could disappear into the walls, but she walked forward, steady, careful, unblinking. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, a thought sharpened like glass. This would not last. Elena worked in silence each night, slipping into her small closet with her laptop pressed to her chest. The closet was narrow and dark, but it felt safer than any room where Ralph could open the door without warning. She closed the sliding panels gently, letting the thin line of light disappear as her heartbeat steadied. Coding became her refuge, the only place where fear turned into something sharp, precise, and alive. Her fingers moved fast, building the first core of Ekko, an AI meant to recognize danger before it hit. She wrote algorithms that measured tone, rhythm, and stress, training them with fragments of captured audio. The earliest recordings were short, trembling files she hid inside folders disguised as tax documents. Ralph's voice burst through them in sudden spikes, violent and ragged, perfect fuel for the model to learn. Each time she replayed his shouting, her hands shook, but she forced herself to keep listening. She clipped the audio, labeled patterns, and tagged emotional intensities like a surgeon stitching wounds. The system began identifying pre-violence markers, subtle things even she hadn't noticed before. A shift in breathing, the scraping of a chair, the hesitation before a slammed fist. Elena expanded the setup, placing a small camera behind the vent where dust gathered thick as fog. She angled it carefully, adjusting the view so it caught the kitchen, the hallway, and part of the living room. She tested the connection twice, then hid the receiver inside an empty cereal box under her bed. Capturing video felt dangerous, like stepping closer to a wild animal on purpose. But she needed proof. She needed data. Ekko's neural net grew stronger with every night. She uploaded new footage into its encrypted folders. Elena worked after her Uber shifts, often returning home at 2 in the morning with numb fingers. She kept her footsteps soft, praying Ralph was asleep, praying the floorboards wouldn't betray her. When she reached her closet, she shed exhaustion like a coat and dove straight into the code. Lines of logic filled the screen, looping patterns that matched his escalating behavior with terrifying accuracy. Ekko began predicting when Ralph would lash out minutes before it happened, a whisper of warning from the machine. Elena tested the system with older recordings, watching Ekko highlight danger zones she once missed completely. The AI didn't panic. It didn't freeze. It calculated. It prepared. And so did she. Night by night, the project grew, forming a secret identity she hadn't meant to create. It was born from fear, but shaped by defiance, a quiet rebellion pulsing beneath the floorboards of their house. Sometimes her mother, Sarah, passed by the closet without opening it, pretending not to notice the thin glow inside. Sarah never asked what Elena was building, but her soft knock on the door meant she supported it. Elena tightened her code each night, knowing every improvement brought her closer to freedom. She wasn't just documenting abuse anymore. She was designing a weapon Ralph would never see coming. Ralph first noticed something small, something Elena hoped he would overlook. He paused in the hallway one morning, staring at the vent as if it had whispered to him. His eyes narrowed, tracing the screws, the dust, the angle of the metal grid that hid the camera. Elena felt her stomach twist when she saw his expression sharpen like a blade. He didn't say a word, but silence from him was always more dangerous than shouting. That afternoon, he tore through the living room, opening drawers that had been untouched for years. He dumped old photo boxes onto the floor, scattering memories like trash across the carpet. Elena stood in the doorway, pretending confusion she didn't feel, keeping her face still and blank. Ralph muttered to himself, packing, scanning shadows as though expecting something to reveal itself. He lifted picture frames, shook books, and flipped cushions, searching for a threat he couldn't name. His suspicion grew heavier each hour, thick enough to soak into the walls and follow Elena around. He confronted her in the kitchen, leaning close enough for her to smell the bitterness on his breath. "Something off," he said, his voice low, almost calm, which made it worse. "You've been hiding things, haven't you?" Elena kept her eyes down, answering softly, letting the lie settle without trembling. She said she was studying late, cleaning old drawers, sorting things for school applications. Ralph didn't believe her, not fully, but he stepped back with a look that promised he'd return. That night, Elena checked Ekko's logs and saw the behavioral spike the AI flagged earlier. Stress markers doubled. Movement patterns sharpened. Risk index high. Her pulse quickened as she watched the heat maps turn red across the household timeline. The AI's prediction was frighteningly clear. Escalation had begun. Sarah noticed Ralph's tension too, watching him with quiet dread as he moved through the house. She slipped into Elena's room when he left, closing the door softly as if hiding from a storm. Without speaking, she handed Elena a small USB wrapped in a paper towel. "I hid this," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough to mean resolve. Elena nodded, swallowing the tight knot in her throat, grateful and terrified at once. They didn't have to discuss what was on the drive. They both knew. Later that night, Ralph went through Elena's backpack while she brushed her teeth, rifling through pockets. She watched his reflection in the mirror, pretending not to notice, counting the seconds until he stopped. He found nothing, but the failure only fueled his paranoia like gasoline on embers. Ekko recorded the incident automatically, tagging it with rising agitation signals and posture analysis. The system noted a shift in his behavior, a new level of calculation in how he searched. It sent Elena a silent alert. He was becoming careful, strategic, almost aware he was being observed. She sat in her closet afterward, breathing shallowly, listening to the code hum in the dim light. For the first time, she realized Ralph wasn't just dangerous. He was becoming unpredictable. And unpredictable meant time was running out. Elena packed her laptop carefully, hiding the extra drives deep inside her bag before leaving for the airport. Kansas awaited, a city of strangers and opportunity, far from the tension that strangled her home. She checked the connection one last time, making sure Ekko had uploaded all new footage safely. The algorithm now tracked subtle microexpressions Ralph could no longer hide, giving her a digital edge. On the plane, she rehearsed her pitch, each word measured, each pause deliberate, like code spoken aloud. She arrived at the tech expo, nerves buzzing beneath her calm exterior, and stepped onto the bright stage. 200 eyes followed her, none suspecting the storm that built her software in fear and silence. She opened her presentation, showing Ekko's predictive models, its capacity to analyze danger before it escalates. The audience leaned forward, intrigued by the AI, unaware that the data feeding it came from real trauma. Investors whispered among themselves, some skeptical, some clearly impressed by the accuracy and speed. Elena demonstrated a live simulation, showing Ekko detecting potential threats in seconds from anonymized footage. Her heart pounded as she avoided thinking of Ralph, who was hundreds of miles away, unaware of her moves. Afterward, executives from NeuraSentry approached, offering her a position with generous pay and equity. Lumacy Dynamics made a competing offer, even higher, with access to greater resources and national reach. Elena smiled politely, knowing the choice wasn't about money, but about power and freedom finally within reach. That evening, she returned to her hotel, checking Ekko's live feeds remotely, ensuring nothing had slipped. Phase 2 was ready. Automated reports sent anonymously to federal oversight agencies, highlighting Ralph's risky behavior. Within days, his applications for firearm permits were rejected, and he appeared on a monitoring list for high-risk individuals. Elena watched the system analyze his movements, public interactions, and past incidents with precision. Ekko flagged patterns humans could miss, turning Ralph into a digital map of predictable threats. Her hands shook slightly with adrenaline, not from fear, but from the satisfaction of control gained. She realized she could extend Ekko's reach beyond her family, saving others from dangers they didn't yet see. Every line of code she wrote was now a shield, a silent intervention that could prevent future harm. Elena spent the night refining predictive models, testing responses, and ensuring the AI would remain adaptive. Her dreams were filled with lines of data and probability curves, mapping Ralph's next moves even as he raged unknowingly. By morning, she had prepared a detailed report of his behavior, anonymized but complete, ready to integrate into Ekko's network. Freedom felt closer, sharper, more tangible than any job offer or promise of promotion. Elena finally allowed herself a small smile, knowing she had turned her fear into something unstoppable. The plane home would be different. She was no longer just surviving. She was stepping into a future she had coded herself, one calculated line at a time. And the storm at home, once looming over her life, was beginning to bend under her quiet, relentless strategy. Ralph returned home earlier than usual, a storm cloud shadowing his face and eyes sharp with suspicion. He had hired someone to scan the house, a private investigator with tools Elena had never imagined. The scanner beeped softly as it swept the rooms, each pulse a countdown to exposure. Elena sat at her desk, pretending to write notes, her fingers hovering over the keyboard with tension. She sensed the shift immediately, the subtle stiffness in his movements, the careful avoidance of certain angles. Ralph stopped near the living room vent, kneeling, examining the screws like he was solving a puzzle. His fingers brushed the metal plate, and he froze, a flicker of realization in his eyes. He turned slowly, scanning the room, and his gaze landed on Elena, piercing, accusing, alive with rage. "You've been recording me," he said, voice low, controlled, more terrifying than yelling. Elena kept her tone calm, measured, her mind racing through legal statutes and evidence chains. "I record for security, for safety," she said, carefully, not revealing more than necessary. Ralph's fists clenched, and he moved closer, each step deliberate, each movement like a test of her composure. "You will delete it all. Now," he hissed, anger coiling like a serpent around his words. Elena shook her head, steady, letting him underestimate her. "All the files are backed up. Every frame, every clip," she said quietly, letting the truth hang in the air. His eyes widened for a brief second, disbelief breaking through his rage. He lunged at her desk, trying to grab the laptop, but she had already triggered remote encryption. The screen went black, refusing his hands and threats, and he slammed it down in frustration. Elena's voice stayed calm, unwavering. "You don't control me. You never did. Ekko has everything it needs to protect us." Ralph stumbled back, fury and fear battling in his expression, his mind finally calculating the risk. He realized the house was no longer a place where he ruled unchallenged. Elena stood slowly, every movement deliberate, projecting confidence he couldn't intimidate. "You think this is over?" He spat, packing, trying to regain dominance, but his strategy faltered. Every threat he made, every intimidation tactic, was cataloged, time-stamped, stored in encrypted servers across continents. She could fight back without lifting a hand, and he could not touch that advantage. Ralph's paranoia grew visibly, his energy oscillating between aggression and hesitation. Elena remained composed, her mind running scenarios, countermeasures, and contingencies. She was no longer the girl hiding in closets, terrified of shadows. She had become a strategist, armed with data, law, and careful precision. Ralph's eyes darted around, seeking weaknesses, but each one was covered, monitored, and accounted for. He could not erase what she had created, and he knew it. Elena's calm radiated like a shield, forcing him to confront a reality he never anticipated. The confrontation stretched hours, tense, silent at times, each side measuring power and consequence. By nightfall, Ralph finally retreated, muttering threats he could not enforce. Elena closed the blinds, exhaled slowly, and reviewed Ekko's logs, watching every movement captured. She had survived the direct confrontation, and more importantly, she had gained a new edge. Ekko was no longer just a tool. It was her armor, her eyes, her weapon, and her assurance that she was no longer vulnerable. The battle had shifted, and she was the one holding the map. Elena packed quickly, gathering essential belongings while Ralph slept fitfully in the living room. Sarah and Madison waited silently in the car, their faces tense but resolute, ready for departure. The snow had stopped, leaving streets slick and reflective under the dim streetlights. Elena took a final glance at the house, a place of fear and memories, and let the door close softly behind her. The engine started, and the car rolled forward, carrying 3 women away from years of terror. Elena monitored Ekko remotely, watching Ralph's movements flagged in real time as the system tracked him outside. He left the house hours later, confused and frustrated, unaware that every step was logged and analyzed. Ekko marked each aggressive gesture, each confrontation he instigated in public spaces like bars or stores. Every interaction added to the database, refining predictive algorithms for future warnings to other families. Elena felt a strange relief, knowing Ralph could no longer dominate their lives directly. She called a safe location for the night, ensuring their route remained untraceable to anyone monitoring. Sarah kept her eyes on the rearview mirror, silent but alert, ready to act if Ralph appeared. Madison fidgeted in the backseat, finally letting herself exhale as the tension of years lifted slightly. Elena reviewed the latest feed from Ekko, seeing Ralph's predictable patterns repeat beyond their home. Aggression spikes, wandering behaviors, verbal confrontations, all cataloged in precise, time-stamped detail. The AI had turned her fear into a shield, her escape into a data-driven strategy. Elena realized Ekko could now help more than just her family, offering warnings to households everywhere. She envisioned a network of protection, families connected through predictive alerts before danger escalated. Night fell fully as they reached the temporary safe house, a small rented apartment under quiet surveillance. Elena set up her laptop, securing all connections and updating Ekko with new parameters. Sarah cooked a simple dinner, and Madison unpacked her bag slowly, the normalcy of routine comforting them. Elena felt the weight of responsibility, knowing Ralph was still out there, but powerless for the first time. She sent anonymized reports to agencies, ensuring Ralph's movements remained flagged without exposing their location. Ekko analyzed local news, bar reports, and public databases, creating a complete behavioral map of Ralph. Elena smiled faintly, recognizing the AI had transformed him into a case study, a lesson in predictive intervention. She thought of families unaware of the dangers around them, imagining Ekko saving them before harm could occur. The night stretched on as Elena refined patterns, improved risk calculations, and encrypted every record. Sarah and Madison eventually rested, leaving Elena to work quietly, the hum of her laptop filling the room. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, knowing she had finally regained control. Her past fear no longer dictated her movements, her decisions, or her future. Every file saved, every analysis completed, was a victory over the power Ralph once held. By dawn, the safe house felt like more than refuge. It felt like the beginning of a new life. Elena closed her laptop briefly, watching Madison and Sarah sleep, a small, calm smile forming. Ekko had grown from fear into empowerment, and so had she. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she led, and Ralph could only follow, trapped within his own predictable patterns. Elena allowed herself hope, a fragile but potent belief that freedom could be permanent. And in that quiet apartment, surrounded by snow and silence, the three of them finally felt a measure of safety. Ralph made one final attempt, hearing an attorney to challenge the evidence Elena had collected. He claimed the files were falsified, manipulated to paint him as dangerous and unstable. Elena watched the case unfold from her safe location, monitoring every step through Ekko's encrypted system. She had already anticipated his move, preparing a full, irrefutable chain of evidence stored globally. Ralph demanded the originals, hopping to intimidate her into compliance, his voice trembling with frustration. Elena responded calmly, offering the complete dataset directly to him, but with conditions attached. "Take the files, and you must accept responsibility," she said clearly, ensuring every word was recorded. His face hardened, the first hint of true fear breaking through years of arrogance. Ralph realized resistance would be pointless. Every misstep was documented and time-stamped. The attorney faltered, unable to dispute the layers of encrypted logs, video, and predictive analyses. Elena's strategy was airtight, combining law, technology, and foresight to corner him completely. Ralph signed agreements under legal supervision, acknowledging his violations and agreeing to therapy. Financial restitution was included, forcing him to compensate Sarah and secure Madison's future. He left the office, beaten not by fists, but by data, intelligence, and careful planning. Elena watched remotely, allowing herself a rare, satisfied smile at the resolution. Sarah finalized the divorce, free from Ralph's shadow for the first time in decades. Madison began her studies in technology, inspired by her sister's courage and innovation. Elena was offered the role of CTO at Lumacy Dynamics, a position granting her full authority over Ekko's development. She accepted, stepping into a leadership role that allowed her to expand protective networks nationwide. Ekko was no longer a secret project. It became a platform saving thousands of families from unseen threats. Elena refined the AI's algorithms, integrating behavioral data from multiple sources for unmatched accuracy. She trained teams to deploy Ekko responsibly, balancing privacy and safety in every implementation. News outlets covered the story of a young woman transforming trauma into technology that prevents violence. Ralph's apology arrived weeks later through a mutual contact, formal but empty, lacking expectation of forgiveness. Elena did not respond. Her focus was on forward motion, on impact rather than reconciliation. She closed the chapter of fear, letting the weight of past abuse dissolve into purpose and action. Her office overlooked the city, sunlight reflecting off the glass, as she reviewed Ekko's latest predictive models. Each alert, each warning, was a reminder that her work saved lives beyond her own family. The software she built from fear now served as a shield for countless people in unseen corners of the world. Elena's past no longer dictated her future. It informed it, strengthened it, and shaped her into a leader. She signed new contracts, reviewed deployment plans, and mentored her team with quiet authority. Freedom, control, and purpose merged into a rhythm she had never experienced as a child. Ralph was a relic of the past, confined by law and consequence, while she stepped fully into the present. Elena leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning the skyline, knowing she had transformed trauma into impact. Every line of code, every decision, every night spent coding in fear had led to this moment of mastery. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely unshakable, ready to lead and protect on a scale she had only imagined. Elena walked through the Lumacy office, her steps steady, each one a mark of reclaimed power. Ekko's dashboard glowed softly on screens around her, tracking data, protecting lives silently. She paused by the window, watching the city stretch below, alive with motion and possibility. Her past haunted her no longer. It had become the foundation of everything she built. Ralph's apology had arrived weeks ago, formal and hollow, and she had ignored it completely. She no longer needed closure from him. She had created her own justice and safety. Madison leaned over her desk, asking questions about the AI, eyes bright with curiosity and ambition. Sarah smiled from across the room, a quiet presence, finally free and at peace. Elena adjusted Ekko's predictive parameters, ensuring families everywhere remained protected from unseen dangers. Every alert, every prevention, was a testament to the transformation of fear into purpose. She signed off on the latest deployment, the software now operational in thousands of households. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was a living, active force she had engineered. Elena exhaled, feeling the weight of the past lift entirely from her shoulders. She had turned trauma into innovation, fear into protection, darkness into light. And as she looked out over the city, she knew this was only the beginning of the life she truly controlled. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about mastery, impact, and the power to protect countless others. Elena smiled, finally at peace, stepping fully into a future she had earned and designed herself.